So can everybody see where it says International Regulations for Prevention of Collision at Sea? That's 1972. Yep. So prior to that, well, the high seas were quite a wild place. And then the IMO, which stands for International Maritime Organization, which is actually a worldwide treaty, put together these collision regulations for sea. I'm going to go through some general rules, and I'm going to highlight a number of them. We'll then go through some steering rules, and then obviously the sailing rules, which are specific to us. And then I'm going to go through sort of conclusion about the rules and some Q&A, and then where to get your ColRegs from. Guys, I'm not going to go through every single rule, and I'm not going to quote every single rule. A number of them don't really relate to us, and some of them are like how bright your lights need to be. That's not really relevant to us. You purchase them, and the manufacturers need to worry about that. And then we've got a couple of quizzes. So they're about 3 or 4 questions each. You can just literally do pen and paper, quick ABC, and see how you do. Okay, so general rules. Okay, so rule 1 is the application of all the rules. Okay, there's the actual quote on what it is. But basically it states that these rules apply to all vessels upon the high seas and all waters connected to high seas, to navigable or seagoing vessels. So this would therefore include up the Rhine River, into Chesapeake Bay, into Table Bay, into the harbour. It won't include places like the Val Dam, where you can't get vessels into from the high seas. So it would include things like the Mississippi River, which is navigable by seagoing vessels. Okay. So that's the application. The responsibility, which is rule number 2, you can read it for yourself. It basically says that there is nothing in these rules, okay, that will get you out of trouble if you don't abide by them. Okay, in other words, avoid collision at all costs, even if you feel you're the stand-on vessel, because these rules won't get you out of trouble. We will see the word ordinary practice of seamen or good seamanship regularly through it. Okay, if there is any sort of collision or close near quarters collision, the captains that do the investigation will look for good seamanship or the ordinary practice of seamen. If they feel you have abided by that, then you haven't got a problem. Okay? Note the words here, owner, master, or crew. So even as crew, even if you're not skipper of the vessel, you can still get into trouble for it. Okay, rule 3. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's loads of them. They're general definitions. They'll just define things before we go into the rules. Okay, so the first one I brought up is the second. Okay, it's power-driven vessel. Okay, this is 99%, 90% of the vessels at sea. The picture here is of a huge MSC container carrier. That is still just a standard power-driven vessel. It's propelled by machinery. Okay, so it can be from the smallest fishing boat to the biggest super tanker there is, to an aircraft carrier, etc. They are all power-driven vessels. No difference. Okay. Second one is number C, a sail-driven vessel, a sailing vessel, which is us, provided we are not using our engines. The moment we put our engines on, we become a power-driven vessel. Okay. Their wording is propelled by machinery. So if you're using your sails, you're not propelled by machinery. So the sailing vessel even if you're using your motor, you go straight back to being a power-driven vessel. Doesn't matter if your sails are up or not. Okay? A vessel engaged in fishing. Okay, this is number D. Okay, you'll notice on the little picture here, I've circled two triangles pointing each other. That's the day shape for it. Okay. This is specifically fishing that restricts maneuverability. This is not your guy that leaves halfway fishing club and he's got a couple of lines out behind his boat. It's not going to affect his maneuverability. This is when you're trawling, you've got long lines, like 2 mile lines behind you. Your fishing apparatus, okay, must restrict your maneuverability to be a vessel engaged in fishing. Okay? Number F, a vessel not under command. That's not a Wednesday night skipper after he's finished a couple of cases trying to get back into the yacht club. That is a vessel that is broken down, disabled, or damaged. Okay? Note the picture again. 2 black balls, one above each other. That is not under command. That's the international day shape for not under command. Okay? Very dangerous vessels. For some or other reason, they cannot maneuver and abide by the rules. You can see on the picture there, 2 black balls. Okay? Then the next one is a restricted inability to maneuver. Okay, that's now rule number 3. Okay? A restricted inability to maneuver vessel, okay, you can see he's got a ball, diamond ball on his picture. That's the day shape again. Okay? He's either working with something that's connected to the bottom, he's got a submarine cable, a pipeline, a navigation mark, anything. He's engaged in dredging, or he's got divers in an underwater operation. He's replenishing of persons or provisions to another vessel while underway. It's a vessel engaged in launching or recovery of aircraft. So anybody who's ever been to the Med, that's one to really watch out for on super yachts. These big, fat, expensive super yachts, they will be motoring into the wind, holding a special course so they can retrieve a helicopter or launch a helicopter for the super rich. So it's not just working vessels that look like this. Be very aware of it if you're in the Med. You'll suddenly see a vessel holding a dead straight course with that ball diamond ball up. Keep out of his way. That aircraft will come towards him. It's not just aircraft carriers. Okay? Mine clearance. Well, that's an obvious one. Keep away from anything that's clearing mines. Okay? And then towing. And this is not all of them. This is just the highlighted ones. Okay? So a vessel in towing is restricted its ability to maneuver. Keep out of their way. Okay? So basically, in an overall view, it's usually a working vessel that can't move. It can't abide by the rules for some or other reason. And he's displaying his ball diamond ball. He's telling everybody, sorry guys, I'm stuck here. Okay. The vessel constrained by draft. The term constrained by draft is day shape here. You can see it's a long cylinder, where my mouse is now, or 3 red lights, one above each other at night. It basically means he can't turn because of either land or shallow depth. Keep out of his way at all cost, because the only thing he can do is stop, and the chances are, if he's constrained by draft, his maneuverability is not good. He can't stop easily. Okay? And underway, the word underway is a vessel not at anchor, made fast to the shore or aground. In other words, not connected to land in any way. Underway has nothing to do with going forward. You can be sitting a mile offshore drifting, not going forward, and you are still underway because you are not connected to the bottom or land. Okay, so Quick quiz, get pen and paper out. A little bit of interaction this week. Where do the ColRegs apply? A, at sea. B, at sea and in harbors. C, at sea and in navigable waters by seagoing vessels. Or D, everywhere. So, it's our first little question. Question 2. When is a vessel underway? Which is the incorrect answer? Is it motoring out of a harbor, drifting at sea, aground with engines running, or being pulled by a tug with no motor running? Which is the incorrect answer? Okay, and then the next one, when we are motoring into port, so we're coming through Table Bay Harbour and our sails are down, are we a sailing vessel, a power-driven vessel, a ram vessel, because your crew's all drunk, or a sailing vessel under power? So, answer to question 1. Where do the ColRegs apply? At sea and in navigable waters by seagoing vessels. Answer to question 2. When is a vessel underway? Which is incorrect. So you're underway if you're motoring out of a harbour, you're still underway if you're drifting at sea, and you're still underway being pulled by a tug with no motor running. If you're aground, you are touching land. Doesn't matter whether your engine's on or off, you're touching land, you are not underway. And then lastly, when we're coming back into port with our sailing boats, our sails are down and we're using our engine, we fall under power-driven vessel. Our sailing vessel status falls away completely. So when motoring in out of the harbour, your rules change for you. You're a power-driven vessel. Therefore, you have to put power-driven vessel lights up. You remove your sailing vessel lights. You avoid collision as a power-driven vessel then. Okay, before we go on, just a very quick thing. I don't think there should be any questions. It was fairly basic. But any questions anybody wants, give it a shot now. Just unmute yourself and ask any questions if you want. Yep, great. Steering and sailing rules. Okay, you don't have to worry about the rule numbers. I've just detailed them for interest sake. So to highlight, part B, steering and sailing. Rule 5, lookout. When you go and do your Master Mariners, you've got to quote this book word for word. You guys don't have to for your any courses that you're going to do. But what you do need to know is that you keep a proper lookout by sight and hearing, as well as all available means. So in other words, if you're in fog with radar, that sort of thing, relevant to the circumstances and conditions, so as to make a full appraisal for risk of collision. In other words, keep looking out everywhere. Don't forget to look behind you. Okay? We were sailing across the Atlantic, middle of the Atlantic, nothing to be seen for miles. I came out of the hatch looking behind us, and there was a super tanker coming straight up behind us. And everybody was looking forward because the spinnaker was up. So remember to look behind as well as around you. Safe speed. Okay? Safe speed is basically saying, can you take proper and effective action to avoid collision? Okay? This is a question that's a favorite by examiners. Okay? By what means? What do you take into account? 1, visibility. 2, traffic density. Obviously, if you're in more traffic, you've got to be a bit more careful. The maneuverability of your vessel itself. Okay? So, literally, do you have a spinnaker up? Can you maneuver if you're coming past the harbor? Background lighting. Don't know how many of you have sailed into the harbor at night. Can you see the little red flashing buoys, the little green flashing buoys, with all the traffic lights behind you? It's called backscatter. Next one, conditions. State of the wind, sea currents, all that sort of thing. Is there navigational hazards around? And then lastly, your draft. How deep's your boat and how deep's the water? So that's a favorite for an examiner to ask you questions. So here's a little acronym. Very terrific men drink cold beer. Visibility, traffic, maneuverability, draft, conditions, and background. So a little acronym to remember it. Very terrific men drink cold beer. That'll give you 6 points for safe speed. Rule 7, risk of collision. Okay. It basically states you will avoid putting yourself in a risk of collision position. If you think there might be one, assume you're going to crash. In other words, if there's doubt, there's no doubt. Okay, so you don't want to go, okay, well, I might just make it around the front of this boat like this guy has, because if something goes wrong there, he is in trouble. So I assume there's going to be a risk of collision. Go around the stern of somebody. Okay, continued risk of collision. How do we judge it? We use a constant bearing closing range. Red boat, green boat, they're sailing, they're same bearing across from each other, sailing, still the same bearing, sailing, still the same bearing, but they're getting closer and closer and closer. Bang, that is a risk of collision, a very high one. So if you've got a constant bearing and closing range in another vessel, that's what it looks like when you go too far. Okay? Doesn't matter which vessel observes it. In this case, 2 bearings like that. Okay? 2 bearings like this. Both vessels will be in trouble in this case, because neither made a maneuver to avoid collision. Remember, right at the beginning, rule 2, responsibility. Okay, actions to avoid collision. Okay, must be positive, made in ample time, and with due regard to the observation of good seamanship. Remember we spoke about good seamanship right in the beginning? Good seamanship. What would be good seamanship? It would be, okay, I did an early turn and I made it in ample time, but then I turned towards another collision. That would be poor seamanship. You would turn away from another collision would be good seamanship. So, to summarize, actions to avoid collision, turn hard and early, and make sure you're not going to hit another vessel after you've turned. That's rule 8. Okay. Next part of rule 8, avoid small alterations of course. If someone's trying to see that you're making a maneuver to avoid collision, very gentle little turns and you can't see. So avoid gentle turns and allow other vessels to see that you've made an alteration of course. At night, change the color aspect of your light to them. Then they know, they can see. Oh, we had a red light and now we got a green light, or we had a green light and we've now got a red light. They can see you've made an alteration. Small turns do not work at all. Rule 9 is narrow channels. The rule is stay on the starboard side. Okay, so if you're coming into Cape Town, okay, and you see all the boats coming in, they want to get into the pub quickly. 9 times out of 10, I see it often, somebody cuts the corner going into Duncan Dock. They cut the corner and they go around the port side by the fueling dock. Don't. Stay right across to the starboard side. It really annoys port control. Okay? Next rule of narrow channels. Less than 20 meters or a sailing vessel shall not impede a bigger vessel. Again, a Royal Cape favorite. I see guys ducking out to try and get to the start line in front of a ship. Don't. You get us all in trouble. The next thing is a fishing vessel shall not impede the vessel of any other vessel in a narrow channel. So even if you see the biggest shoal of tuna, ignore it. You can't throw a line out. Okay. Rule 10, traffic separation schemes. They're basically highways of the ocean. They're obviously not painted on the ocean, the water is there, you just see them on charts. Some of them will have buoys marking off like where the numbers are, 9, 10, 8, 11. Some of them will have buoys there, some of them won't, okay? You've got to travel in the correct lane at any given stage, okay? You see here's a north-going lane, there's a south-going lane, another south-going lane, and then another north-going lane, okay? This is a traffic separation scheme, okay? Cape Town Harbour has a VTS, a vessel traffic scheme that's going in and out of the harbour. So if you look at a chart of Cape Town Harbour, you'll see the same funny purpley pink colour. Okay, it works exactly the same as a TSS. It's exactly the same. Okay, the one thing to do is avoid crossing traffic separation schemes. Avoid it if you possibly can. Cruising outside Cape Town Harbour, avoid it, just go around it. If you have to cross it, cross at right angles. Get across as quickly as possible. And if you're in tide, cross, make sure your course over ground is right angles. Okay? So you're putting yourself the biggest vision possible. Okay? Vessels under 20 meters and our sailing vessels stay in the inshore traffic zone. We're out of the way of the big vessels there. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. Avoid anchoring. Now, I've said avoid anchoring because something goes wrong with your boat and you're being washed ashore, you might well have to anchor. But avoid it if possibly can. Something happens to your boat that you're forced to anchor in a TSS, you've got bigger problems than the TSS, and port control will be on the radio to you, getting assistance to you. Okay? A vessel less than 20 meters in length, or a sailing vessel, shall not impede the course of a power-driven vessel in the TSS. So these ships, we don't get in their way, ever. Now, when we're sailing on bigger than 20-meter vessels, yes, we're still a sailing vessel. We don't get in the way, even though they're bigger than 20 meters. Okay? And the offshore rules, mostly racing rules that is, prohibit entry into these areas. It'll be somewhere in the rules of most offshores saying you must avoid at all costs, and the racing rules are therefore disqualification if you sail into these TSSs. So if we're doing a race around here and you start there and you want to go there, you'd literally have to go like that, across, and then out again, under most racing rules. In fact, I haven't done a race for many years that doesn't have that detailed. Okay, big one for us. Rule 12, which is specific to sailing vessels. This rule is specific to sailing vessels only. Nothing to do with power-driven vessels. Okay. Starboard tack is a stand-on vessel. Starboard tack is when the wind is coming over your starboard side. So you can see, beautiful old gaff rigger here. He's on starboard tack. The wind's coming over his starboard side. Port tack, when the wind's coming over your port side, okay, that means you are the giveaway vessel. Please note the words stand on and give way. There is no such thing as right of way at sea. There isn't a right of way at all. It is stand on and give way. Because if the giveaway vessel doesn't give way correctly, then you must become the giveaway vessel. You stand on until you realize there's a collision, then you become the giveaway vessel. I happened to be on this boat at the time of this photograph. We went just ahead of him, no problem. This boat got behind him, no problem. There was no risk of collision at any given point, although the photograph looks like we're about to bang into each other. Okay. Then there's windward, leeward. Okay, a windward boat coming into the wind must give way to a leeward boat. Okay, so if you come upwind towards this guy, he must give way to you. That does not account for if you're on port tack and the windward boat is on starboard. Port and starboard will overrule windward, leeward. So if somebody's coming downwind on starboard and you're going upwind on port, you're still the giveaway vessel because you're a port tack boat. But if somebody comes up against you and you are the windward vessel, you are the giveaway vessel. Okay, overtaking. Rule 13. Now this is back to normal boats, all boats. Okay, so Rule 13 applies to us and power boats and so on and so forth. Only Rule 12 is specific to sailing boats. Overtaking vessel is the giveaway vessel. It doesn't matter if you're a sailing boat, a super tanker, or a ram vessel, or a fishing boat engaged in fishing. You are the overtaking vessel, you are the giveaway vessel. Until you are clear ahead, you will remain the overtaking vessel. The vessel being overtaken must hold their course and speed. Now, the best way to overtake a vessel is basically get on a VHF, call the vessel up and say, I'm overtaking you from your port quarter, boat B. You happy with that? He will say yes, and off you go. Two boats approaching head-on. Both vessels turn to starboard to avoid collision. See that? Boat A, boat B. That means you're passing port to port. Now, if we go back and we think about staying to the starboard side of a channel, and you're going into the channel, somebody comes out and they're on the starboard side of a channel, that means you're still passing port to port, doesn't it? So you want to go port to port, or red light to red light. if you've got a crossing situation, okay, you will vessel approaching from the port side. You see here, the stand-on vessel, you see the vessel approaching from the port side is the give-way vessel. Okay, so if you can see a red light, you're the give-way vessel. You see the port side of the vessel, you'll give way, which again comes down to passing port to port. So if you just keep port to port in mind, you can't really go wrong with your crossing situations. Put the port side of your boat on their boat. If you can see the starboard side of their boat, you don't move, because they need to see your port side. Okay, the action by a give-way vessel, Rule 16, is take early and substantial action to keep clear. Remember, you're the give-way vessel now. You're the one that's got to make the turn. Okay, this particular photograph, that would be way too late. Way too late. There's the vessel engaged in fishing, and this sailing boat, you can see, has got a block here. That's a couple of 100 meters. It's way too late. Okay. Rule 17, what does the standby vessel do? Okay. He holds his course and speed. Otherwise, this happens. Somebody will turn, and you crash into each other. Maintain course and speed. That means the other vessel knows what you're up to. So if you stand on, you hold your course and speed, therefore you're not giving the other vessel a shock by moving. However, if you think you have to take action, you take action. But avoid going to port. Because if the other vessel is turning to starboard to go port to port, and you turn to port, you're closing the distance between the two vessels. Okay? Okay, responsibility, Rule 18. Now, this is a responsibility between vessels. In other words, what type of vessel gives way to whom on the water? So, as I said right at the beginning, not under command. Everybody gives way to not under command. He has his two black balls right at the top. He cannot abide by the rules. Next one is a ram vessel, ball down and ball. Okay. He's got divers down. He's got connected to the bottom of dredging gear. He's working for some reason. You'd avoid him. Okay. He would avoid at all costs a not under command vessel though. He would avoid at all costs if he possibly could. Okay? Although this doesn't fit into Rule 18, I've added constrained by draft here. Remember this, the cylinder? It fits sort of in this section here. And it's not actually in Rule 18, but constrained by draft, anybody below that would have to give away to them. Okay? Engaged in fishing. There's these little triangles pointing at each other. So everybody, he gives way to all the vessels above him. And comes us, the sailing boat. We give way to everything else above that. And lastly, power-driven vessels. They give way to everybody. There's a nice little picture of a speedboat here. As I said, power-driven vessels can be a super tanker. He's got room to maneuver. He must give way. You hold your course and speed. Okay. Next little section. Restricted visibility. A couple of things to note in this rule. These rules and the rules are quite different to when vessels are in sight of one another. This is when vessels are not in sight of one another, which means you're in or near an area of restricted visibility. You may be in, excuse me, you may be in the most beautiful sunshine with a fog bank next to you. You don't know if there's a tanker coming out of the fog bank. So you treat yourself as in restricted visibility. What are different types of restricted visibility? We all think of fog. Heavy rainfall, sandstorms, snowstorms, they're all considered. I had a new one this time. We were sailing past Australia during the fires. The smoke and soot in the air was so thick, we couldn't see for a couple of 100 meters. That was it, coming off Australia. There. A power-driven vessel shall have her engines ready for immediate maneuver. To be quite honest, when I'm in restricted visibility sailing, I have my engine ticking over as well, just in case. Because if you need to move out of the way of a big ship, you do. Okay? A couple of turning rules on it. The following should be avoided. Note the word avoided. An alteration of course to port for a vessel forward of the beam. Okay, other than obviously being overtaken. So don't turn to port for a vessel forward of the beam. That's the same thing. If he's turning to starboard and you turn to port, you're closing your course together. An alteration of course towards a vessel, a beam or abaft to beam. So if you hear a vessel behind you or a beam of you, just to repeat, to reiterate, a beam means off the sides and abaft means behind you. Okay, you don't turn towards any vessels behind you. So that leaves you basically being able to turn to starboard. Okay, another little quiz, a little bit of interaction. Two sailing yachts approaching, and we are on starboard tack, and they're on port. What should we do? Should we stand on, give way, tack, jibe, panic? Okay. We are on starboard tack, they are on port. Starboard tack, the wind's coming over our starboard side and our boom's leaning over our port side. Stand on, give way, tack or jibe. We, which is still a sailing boat, are 200 nautical miles from the shore. And we see we're on a collision course with a whopping great ship. What should we do? Stand on, give way, slow down, run away because he's smelly. Okay, remember we're 200 nautical miles away from shore. What should we do? Next to the question, we're racing in Table Bay. When do the ColRegs apply versus the international racing rules? Here's a question for everybody who goes out on a Wednesday night. When do these rules apply? At all times? After sunset? Just after the start, or they don't? We race under the racing rules. So Wednesday night, we're out there. There's a ship coming past. What do we do? Okay, so first question. We're on starboard tack, they're on port. We are the stand-on vessel. We hold our course and speed. Second question. We're a sailing vessel, and the ship is a power-driven vessel, not constrained by draft, because we're 200 nautical miles offshore. We're not anything. We literally, there's no reason for him not to maneuver around us. He's just a power-driven vessel. We stand on, we hold our course and speed. Okay? If this question was rephrased and we were in shallow water in a channel, completely different, because he's constrained by draft. Whereas 200 miles offshore, he's just a power-driven vessel, and we're a sailing vessel. Responsibility between vessels. Okay, we read tonight. Which rules apply? The ColRegs apply above and beyond all racing rules to any vessel other than our own fleet. all times. If a tug comes out, if there's a tow, if there's a vessel at anchor, the ColRegs apply above and beyond everything else. Okay, so finishing up. Good timer, we've got a couple of minutes to go. It's just scratching the surface, but it gives you some idea of what we're looking at within the rules. You can buy a book of the ColRegs in most good charteries or chart suppliers, things like that. You can find the PFDs online as well. Okay. When you're learning them, obviously the ColRegs gives you the lights and sound signals and shapes for your exams. You will be asked things like safe speed and lookout. So that's why I gave you that little acronym, plus some other questions. Learn the rules as well as just the lights, sounds, and shapes. Okay? There are hundreds of phone apps out there for learning aids. The one I use is called Marinus. So if anyone wants to download it, it's pretty good. Okay, let's unmute. Let's see how we're going. Any questions on that lot?
Dave, yeah, I have a question. Sorry, you're speaking here. On the lookout part,
yeah.
What's your opinion? I suppose you're just asking for your opinion rather than an explanation of the rules on single-handed on the ocean and then on lookout. How does that work?
No, basically the single-handed boats are breaking the ColRegs the moment they go single-handed and fall asleep.
And how does it work with insurance then?
That you'd have to ask their insurance company.
Okay.
From personal experience, when I've been single-handedly across oceans, you don't get insurance.
Yeah. Okay. Clear. Thank you.
No other questions? All the ColRegs rules out there, we've got no questions.
David, Johan here.
Yeah, hi,
could I ask you to explain, I get confused with that, I understand when two vessels are, I refer to Rule 12, sorry. I understand when two vessels are on opposite tacks, the vessel on starboard tack is a stand-on vessel, and I get that, and within the same tack, sorry, the vessel to windward is the giveaway vessel. Where I get confused is if a vessel is on a port tack and sees a vessel to windward but cannot determine which tack this vessel is on, she must assume the vessel is on a starboard tack give way.
Yeah. If you remember the whole thing right in the beginning, if there's any doubt, there's no doubt. If you are unsure, you assume that you are the giveaway vessel. Remember, right in the beginning we spoke about if there's any doubt, there's no doubt, assume you're going to crash. So if you're unsure of if you're on port tack and you are unsure of the other vessel, assume you're the one that's going to maneuver and be ready for maneuver. Did that answer your question, Jan?
Yes, I get confused because on one point it says that the windward vessel gives way, but then it says that if you see a vessel to windward but cannot determine which tack this vessel is on, she must assume the vessel is on a starboard tack and give way. But the vessel is still windward, so it kind of contradicts the previous point. No?
Port and starboard. Remember, I said to you, port and starboard overrides windward leeward.
Okay, all right, with you.
If you've got a port and starboard situation, it doesn't matter if you're windward or leeward, your port and starboard will override windward leeward.
Okay, I've got it. Cool, thanks. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Any other questions?
Yeah, Dave, Richard here.
Right.
Dave, any tips or suggestions of how to see lights? You know, you see these big boats at night, they're covered in working lights, and to try and see what's actually going on is certainly to me sometimes impossible. Do you have any suggestions?
Apart from just practice and keep looking, a pair of binoculars works really well. You wouldn't think to put on a pair of binoculars at night, but if you can get a pair of binoculars onto a ship at night, you can actually see the lights far more easily.
Thanks.
David, just adding on to that, and a good question, Richard. Are you allowed to just call up people on VHF just to clarify their situation or their lighting if you can't figure it out because of all the working lights?
Yes, of course. The more communication between vessels at sea, the less chance of collision. I mean, I'll often call a ship up and say, "What are your intentions?" You know,
Yeah.
I'm a sailing vessel. You're steaming up behind me. What are your intentions?
Yeah.
Quite often, more often than not, they haven't actually seen you, and you've woken up the bridge, and they go, "Oh, brilliant, sailing vessel, let's move."
Okay. All right. So that's common course, or that's common practice out there.
Very common practice.
Okay, good. David, there's a question on the chat. Maybe you want to have a look at that.
Read it out for me, because I can't actually see the chat at the moment.
Okay, it's from Heidi Berger. Do Port of Cape Town rules take preference over ColRegs? So commercial power-driven vessels have right-of-way over sailing vessels in the Port of Cape Town.
That is correct. Port of Cape Town have got a substantial set of sub-rules, okay? We are a guest within the Port of Cape Town and not actually supposed to sail within the port limits. So we are supposed to be a power-driven vessel. And from my understanding, unless it's changed, we are to avoid at all costs, or unless there's some sort of damage to your boat and you can't, we are to avoid any commercial traffic in the harbour. And that's sailing or motoring.
Is that why in the past we were allowed to raise our mainsails in Duncan Dock, and off late, well, in sort of the last 9 months, they've been sort of pushing back on that and saying you can only push out your mainsail when you're outside the harbour?
Honestly, I don't know what's been going on in their meetings. I do know that a couple of the Port Authority guys were getting quite cross with Royal Cape members raising sails and doing things in the harbour, interfering with commercial traffic. But honestly, what happens in their meetings, I honestly don't know.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so next week, definition of a position, course and speed, latitude and longitude, where it originates, how it works, that sort of thing. Knowledge of standard nautical terms when it comes to chart work as such, true bearings and courses, and where the knot comes from, the knot. Guys, that's it for this week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wavy.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.